Hey, folks, that is the shortest intro we've ever played. I think on the Bleeding Edge, a 30-second intro. That's it. No crazy videos. I didn't play any crackhead, you know, WTF TikTok type videos or anything. We're setting a serious tone here on the Bleeding Edge tonight. Since we've got for our second time, we've got June coming on as a guest. I want to give off a professional impression to him. Just I don't want to scare him away too quickly. But anyways, folks, we here at the MCU's Bleeding Edge are doing our main show, our Wednesday evening show here tonight. And of course, I want to shout out everybody out there that supports the MCU's Bleeding Edge and listens and watches all of our videos when they become unlive on YouTube and the other platforms we're on. We're here to do episode 2 of the Lord of the Rings of Power. I believe it's Prime Video series they like to describe it, not Amazon Prime or whatever. That's fine. And essentially break it down and review it and whatnot, and sort of run through it and flush out, I guess, what everybody thought here in the group were the highlights or the low points maybe of the episode. At that point, of course, I've got with me my trusty, good friend, loyal co-host, extremely talented, remarkable man, Cybernetic Shark, the veteran YouTuber and content creator, who's got over a decade into the grind. You know what I'm saying? So he ain't playing. You know what I'm saying? He's like an OG of the content creation game. And as usual, he brought with him his amazing green screen with his awesome Rings of Power image, which I'm loving. They did a pretty good job on those logos. I don't know. I don't think they're as good as the House of Dragon ones, but Cyber, how's it going, brother?
Going good. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to be delving into this series more that we're, starting to get a chance to I guess almost kind of come back to this universe again, and at the same time sort of learn some of these new characters and whatnot and everything that we don't really know from from what we've seen or read in the past, or maybe we've heard of only. So June, just to be clear, June does not have any actual bona fide credentials in terms of having co-hosted any shows or whatever and whatnot or anything, or being a podcast host or something. But he is a extremely from jump valuable contributor as a guest, which I detected immediately upon recording with him. And he managed to handle his business and be a professional, even when we did our first show together live with me moderating through my freaking cell phone, walking around in my garage and shit the whole time. So it was like a shit show version of the show, and June could have just left, but instead he stuck it out. So there you go. He's got a lot of fortitude about him. But June, it's good to welcome you back to the Bleeding Edge, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited. The first time I actually saw the Rings of Power episode, I was thinking, wow, I'm pretty sure Jeff's probably going to do something about this. So I'm just really excited to be here. Yeah.
I love it that you said that. You know what? That's awesome that you thought of me, man. It makes me happy. I'll tell you, Cyber, what I love about June is his energy. He's very positive and actually gets extremely excited and looks forward to these discussions and doing these shows. He's really all about it, so you know how it is. I love that energy, man. It's nice to see. It's nice to hear.
Good thing.
Yep. Now all we need is Drunk Wizard, and we'll be ready to, and we'll be good to go be a complete squad. But no, I'm just joking. I'm just kidding. Drunk Wizard, we wish you the best, man. We hope you're doing well, brother. I'm sure you're drunk as usual, and what I would expect nothing less from you. You know what I mean? You're very consistent when it comes to that. I got to give you credit for that. Some people talk about being drunk or whatever. Well, Drunk Wizard gets drunk when he gets drunk. So legitimately. For those who don't know about Drunk Wizard, it doesn't matter. Don't even worry about it. It's all good. But bottom line, I guess a good way to start the show off would be, besides mentioning out there, folks, I'm not a big plugger, but please subscribe to the MCU's Bleeding Edge YouTube channel. Check out our podcast, which I'm almost caught up with the YouTube channel. I'm almost there. And please do us a favor. And when you leave, leave us a like. Don't be afraid to comment. Even if you have something negative to say to us and whatnot, we don't mind. We like a little critical feedback from time to time. It's how we grow and evolve. So, at that point, I guess how I'd start things off would be probably just a simple comparison. Going to you, June, and then to you, Cyber. Which episode did you think was better out of the first two? The first episode or the second episode?
I think I found the first episode to be better, but was more intrigued by the second episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything more detail orientated to that? Do you want to add to that?
Well, essentially, I thought, first of all, the introduction to the story was great. The first episode threw out a bunch of small little arcs, but each of them was so well done and well kind of produced, and the storytelling was really good. So where instead of having one kind of favorite character, I was immediately kind of like, oh man, like there's all these really cool characters, and it's cool to see them, see some of the locations. But then the second episode, insofar as was driving the story forward, it wasn't so much set up for the story, but the story started moving really quickly. Got me more intrigued into what was actually kind of happening and where these characters were going to go, when they would eventually cross paths, where is the whole storyline kind of going. So the first one kind of caught my interest, and the second one really drove it home to where I realized, wow, the show was actually really good. And I was one of the people that initially was kind of unsure about how it was going to be, and I was not really excited for it, but it's very quickly changed my mind.
Well, I got to be honest with you. Now that I think about it, I never really had I never had high or low expectations for the series at all. Coming into it, I really didn't know what to expect. I just assumed that since it is coming from the Lord of the Rings universe, that it couldn't be terrible. At least, you know what I mean? I had higher expectations for it than Venom. I'll put it to you that way. Going back to our earlier conversation. But Cyber, what did you think, buddy? Did you enjoy episode 1 more? Or did you enjoy episode 2 more? Which one was a better episode?
As me and June were talking before, I find the first episode better. As I was telling him, I thought that the first episode had a lot more smoother transition throughout the whole episode versus the second episode. I thought there was a few sections of the second episode that lagged, and there was just too much storytelling going on, and just it made it boring. And I thought that the first episode did a really good job of meshing all the story together and making it transition smoothly throughout the whole entire episode. So I thought the first episode was better.
Okay. So you think that the structure basically then, I guess, or the flow of that first episode was better, better put together, I guess. That episode 2 was maybe a little bit more disjointed.
Correct.
Or it didn't connect to that same almost organic level or to that fluid level.
Yes, and I think another reason why that is because they had too many stories going on all at the same time. And the stories, when you have too many stories going on, not only are you going to kind of get disjointed, you're also going to be like, okay, well, this story needs to get to a certain point so that it can cut off, that you're not losing anything, but at the same time, it's at a spot that you can stop that you're not worried about missing anything. And I feel that's kind of what the episode did. It didn't do that very well.
Sure. I get where you're coming from. On my own, I just wanted to check something real quick. On my own, I guess one thing I noticed was that, of course, my pen fell 20 feet away from me. I definitely felt a different tone as far as the energy of the episode overall. It was very different. The energy overall was very different than episode 1. And episode 2 lacked some of the profound sort of moments. You know what I mean? Some of the very, I felt very deep moments, almost impressive or visually almost spectacular moments that we experienced in episode 1. I felt we missed a little bit of that with episode 2. But then again, coming off of June, they're trying to carry the story. You know what I mean? And drive it forward throughout the series, right? And so we all know, Cyber, you being a veteran of this kind of stuff, you know how it is. You're going to have your lulls, right? no matter what series it is. Even The Sopranos had boring episodes here and there. They did, not many, but but some. If you're a Sopranos fan, if you didn't like The Sopranos, then maybe you thought it was all boring. I don't know. Who knows?
I actually thought it had zero lull moments because it was just the most perfect show ever made. But agree to disagree? Cool.
Okay, well, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me change my wording. Maybe boring is not fair. Maybe what I meant is just that the Sopranos was so good most of the time that like there were a couple episodes here and there where the storylines of them or whatever just didn't wow me or like really do a lot.
Sure, yeah.
That's all I meant.
Right.
But basically, to basically, I guess, sort of recap episode 1. We find out in episode 1 essentially that Galadriel is essentially, I guess, going to be the main character or the feature character of the series, I'm assuming. Or at least she was of episode 1, right? And we'll see how things play out, of course, the span of the whole series. Hey, what's going on, Jocelyn? How you doing, hon? Jocelyn is actually one of my fellow TBI survivors, friends that I know from like TBI survivor support groups on Facebook, and she's fun. She actually did a couple of Bleeding Edge reactions with me and has been introduced to Bandmaid, so she's been very blessed in that area. But anyways, no, so basically, they basically flushed out in episode 1 the entire premise of the story in the beginning, as far as the fact that the elves, had to leave their homeland. They had to fight Morgoth and everything and whatnot. And the Dark Forces, they had a war that lasted centuries. They moved to Middle Earth. Galadriel, essentially is like almost like their I guess most talented warrior to some extent. She's not like Lady Galadriel from the films. She's the younger, more like fighter, battle, war kind of Galadriel version. And Elrond, they refer as like to a steward, I think, essentially, like in the first episode, like she's not
politician.
He hasn't risen to the same levels as of like in the Lord of the Rings movies. Although I must say, I think that actor that plays Elrond so far in the series has been great. He's been a standout to me. But basically,
but looks nothing like Hugo Weaving.
No, of course not. But you know what?
Nothing, and he's like a foot shorter.
It might be, it might be one of those situations, Cyber, where it's just really hard to find in somebody another actor that actually that looks like a younger version of Hugo Weaving.
No excuses. They should have got a different actor that looked more like him. I can't be that hard. They could have put prosthetics on him.
But he does such a good job. But he's such a good actor.
No, they should have had Drunk Wizard play the role. You know what I'm saying? Can you imagine if Drunk Wizard was Elrond in the series? That'd be something else, man. That would be. I mean, he would really add his own twist to the character. I don't know how
like him.
I don't know how well he would do with his lines, knowing that he's drunk all the time, whatnot, everything. I don't know, what he'd end up like saying in his scenes or whatever. You don't know what the fuck you get from him, really. But it definitely would be interesting. I can tell you that. And don't expect Drunk Wizard to actually like read anything about the Lord of the Rings coming into the show or doing his acting. He won't even know anything about it. He won't care. So you don't even worry about that. He's like our buddy Kevin that can review episodes of shows without even watching them. He's so good. It's unfortunate, Drew, that you ever got a chance to meet Kevin. He's a great guy. But anyways, bottom line, throughout the course of the episode, we in the first episode 1, we basically just get the gist that we meet the hobbits of this time. That we sort of find out in episode 2, I guess, in some way, maybe was like the Sweden, of like World War II, of their version of World War II. Either like sat things out and didn't side with men and elves and whatnot and everything and dwarves, or like maybe even like teamed up with the Dark Lords and the Dark Lord. I don't know yet. They didn't really say it officially, but got some hints there. And basically, Galadriel's mission in life in episode 1 is to hunt Sauron who is like, what's left as like a leader of the spread out, forces of the dark, the Dark Lord, the dark forces of, that whole deal. And she's hunting him down after he kills her brother, who was doing, had the same pursuit. And we end up with the king of the elves essentially saying that, hey, it's time to go home. And he's not concerned about Saran. He's not worried about it. So essentially at the end of the episode, we end up with Galadriel jumping ship on her way back home, right at the precipice, essentially, of of going back to her homeland. She jumps off, grabs her sword, and jumps off the ship. Head back to Middle Earth, and I guess continue her mission to hunt down Saran. She's almost, I guess, like the catalyst of the the series, to where she's the one that senses the enormity and the gravity of what Saran's capable of, and does not feel comfortable just letting him roam free, knowing that he's still there around. And of course, this does blend into episode 2, but at the end of episode 1, we see essentially a smoldering town, if you want to call that, or homestead, Horwood, and I believe it was Arendelle that came across it, or it was those 2 young hobbits, Poppy, I think, and Nori, and they found the the Starman guy, hanging out in the ashes and the cinders of the burning town or whatever. What his deal is, I have no idea. So really have no clue. But either way, that's pretty much how things concluded. Well, that's okay, Josh. We're entertaining no matter what. You know what I mean? You don't need to know anything about what we're covering, so we're still good. You should still enjoy the show and check us out. But no. So if I remember correctly, I believe the episode essentially starts with coming right off that scene, and we end up with Poppy and Nori, and again the naked man, laying there essentially asleep or unconscious in the ashes or whatever, somehow alive, and he wakes up and sort of has powers of some kind, I guess. He's got the winds running around and everything and whatnot. He's got debris flying around. He can't speak their language. They can't communicate with him. And he almost basically just whispers to some extent at times. He doesn't even really talk when he does talk. But so Nori and Poppy want to do a good deed. At least Nori does. So they want to help him. They pick him up. They put him on their little wagon or whatever and whatnot. And they take him back to their homestead. To help him out or whatever. They feel like it's the right thing to do. And hey, what's up, Nikki? No, I do not believe that was Gandalf, Nikki. But you know what? Who knows? Maybe that was Gandalf. I didn't even think about that. I don't think it was, though. I don't know. What do you think, Cyber? Was that Gandalf?
In what scene?
The Starman guy in the burning.
No, I don't think it's Gandalf.
No.
I think he's somebody. I think he's a different person altogether.
What do you think, June? Is that Gandalf?
My first guess was Saruman, Christopher Lee's character from the trilogy.
Oh, Saruman.
Yeah, so I actually thought that's who he might be. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? It never even occurred to me that was a wizard. Hey, thanks a lot, Nikki. I mean,
yeah, I think him and Gandalf are the same beings. I think they're both Maiar, so I think that's who it might be.
They're of the same race, or whatever you want to call it, essentially. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that could be Saruman. That's true. Either way, so basically, I think that's a good spot right there to go ahead and kind of, I guess, go to you guys here, on the panel. What were your thoughts, I guess, right off the bat with the intro of the episode starting off again with this naked dude? Where I don't know about you guys, but at the end of episode 1, I had no clue what that was about or what was going on with that. I had no idea. I don't know who that was or why that was happening. Cyber, did that scene reveal anything more for you or anything, or give you more of an idea of what the hell was going on with him? Or
Well, no, because I mean, it really in anything, what it showed was, oh, we have this new character that just popped up. We don't know anything about him, but we definitely know that there's something magical about him. And so, I mean, that beginning sequence, you really don't get much out of it except for, the halflings are kind of like, what the hell is going on? Who is this person? And we need to keep this wrapped tight and, figure out what to do with this guy. So I think that sequence really doesn't let you in on a whole bunch. It just kind of makes you go, oh, this is interesting. Where are we going with this?
most definitely. And what do you think, Cyber? What do you think of the Hobbits overall so far? Going back to episode 1 just a little bit, backtracking. What do you think? What do you think so far of the injection, I guess, of the Hobbits into this story?
I mean, overall, it's been fun. I think that getting to see some different Hobbits is refreshing. Compared to what we've already gotten from the previous films, and that we've gotten that kind of we're very familiar with Sam, we're very familiar with Frodo, Merry, Pippin, and Bilbo, and so forth and stuff like that. And we got to know a little bit about the other people in the Shire and stuff like that, but they didn't really focus on those characters very much, except for those main characters. So in this, we kind of get this intro to these new Hobbit characters, and we have we have more predominantly female hobbits that we're introduced to. So this is going to be a little different because we're getting this completely different kind of perspective, because now it's female hobbits that we're really focusing on versus it being male hobbits in this one. So I think so far it's been fun. I think that the main Hobbit girl's dad was my favorite Hobbit so far. I think he's hilarious, and I think he has a lot of good and great potential further down the road in this series.
Okay. Did he? What do you think, June? As far as the Hobbits go, and then after that, your take on that opening scene with maybe it was Gandalf, maybe it was Saruman, whoever the naked guy was, and the Hobbit, the Hobbit deal there. I mean, what did you think of all that? What do you think of the Hobbit so far in the series?
I think culturally, it's really cool to see how this is the same Hobbit culture that will eventually go on to evolve into the Hobbit culture we see in the movies. I think they do a really good job of displaying their kind of almost bohemian kind of lifestyle, and they're so separated from all these kind of greater things that it actually ends up giving more magnitude to the fact that it was hobbits that ended up essentially saving the world in the trilogy. So I think that's really cool to see as a dynamic. And overall, as the opening scene, I thought it was a really interesting display of a very different kind of magic than we've seen in a lot of other kind of fantasy shows. So the Gandalf Saruman character, just the way that his power is conveyed and the sheer force and how overwhelming it must be for a hobbit to witness, knowing how little they know the world, I think it was a really good way to display the difference between the two characters.
Okay. And what was your initial thoughts, I guess, based off of that intro with the hobbits finding the naked man or whatever, whatnot, in the smolders and whatnot? What did you initially think of that whole thing? I mean, what was your theories in your mind as far as what was going on there with him?
So, like I said, my initial thought was, oh, this has to be, because I think from the lore, the Maiar are almost these kind of angelic beings, or they're angels essentially, and for something like something that powerful to kind of come to this realm, it would have to be in kind of this awesome display of power, like a meteor or a comet, hitting the planet. And at that moment, I immediately just started thinking about like, oh, what does this mean? Are we going to see more characters that are from that other kind of place? Are we going to delve more into the lore of who the Maya are, who the original creations were? They mentioned some other names from the actual mythos, like Aule later on. So that's just what got me excited. So all I could think about at that moment was, oh man, there's so much lore behind this. I want to see what else they explore.
Yes, and I definitely got that same. In fact, I was talking to my daughter about it during when the daughter and I watched the episode together. She's down here in Southwest Florida, spending some time with my family, with me, and everything and whatnot. I don't get to see her that much these days now that she's actually an adult. Believe it or not, yes, folks, I'm that old. I have adult children, if you can believe it or not. I know I look so youthful, but you know, I'm actually 77 years old. So just to be clear, no, I'm not. But either way, I'm sorry, Cypher. I'm just fucking around, man. My bad. I know I don't look like I'm 77 years old. Actually, some chicks are delusional and actually think that I look like I'm very young or whatever, which I don't really get, but I don't really think I do. Either way, I'll tell you, I guess for me, you know, again, what Isabella and I both were talking about was the connection again of, you know, the reminder of like of Mary and Pippin and Sam and, you know, and Frodo and the resemblance, almost not resemblance, but the connection, you know, the same sort of like energy or the same sort of naivete, like naive positivity or optimism almost that like the younger hobbits tend to have to some extent, it seems. And that's what I really noticed about them too, was that same energy. But I'll tell you, basically, you know, and again, guys, feel free to correct me in terms of the flow, I guess, of the episode, because when I did my outline, I didn't really try to like make it perfect as far as like, you know, from scene to scene. But oh shit, basically, you know, where we end up off as far as you know, again, the Horwood being burnt down, the Hobbit kids finding, you know, the naked guy, we then kind of end up with I believe it's pronounced Celebrimbor, you know, talking to Elrond. And of course, Celebrimbor is the elven smith who forges the Rings of Powers, you know, overall in the story and whatnot and everything. And they have a conversation about the fact that Celebrimbor wants to essentially create more powerful, impactful type things other than jewelry and stuff and whatnot. At that point, he needs a forge and a tower. And, you know, and these things seem to be almost impossible to them to do on their own. And so at that point, Elrond suggests, you know, seeking aid from his friends, the dwarves over at Khazad-dûm, which we all remember, of course, from the movies, the Mines of Moria, except, of course, this Khazad-dûm, which we'll talk about, you know, shortly, is the actual, like, Great Khazad-dûm, you know, that was remembered before it, like, sort of fell apart and, like, became kind of decrepit and whatnot and everything in the Lord of the Rings film. So, oh, okay, Nikki, it's not Saruman. Saruman sees zero value in hobbits. Gandalf does, and apparently this is why. Yeah, you know, I mean, who knows? You never know, Nikki. Maybe that is Saruman, and he doesn't see any value in hobbits except for maybe as like you know, some kind of sexual fetish. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and he's just trying to, you know, fulfill that or whatever, that, you know, in him or whatever. You never know. So maybe Saruman's got some kinks, but you never know with those wizards, man. Either way, essentially, King Durin rules the, you know, the dwarven kingdom, if you want to call that or whatever, you know, the, you know, the Mines of Moria, Khazad-dûm. I believe it's King Doran. Doran, is it right? Or is it Prince Doran that's Elrond's friend? Guys. Is it Prince Doran? Is he the one that's Elrond's
Prince Doran,
friend?
yeah.
Yeah. Who is the king of the
The king is also Durin.
He's
during the
oh
third and then during the fourth. Yeah.
okay. I
Yeah.
see. All right, yeah, I get it now. They have the same name. Okay, yeah, because I wrote it down as King Durin, and I'm like, I got confused there for a minute.
You're
I'm like,
technically right. It is King Durin,
yeah, okay, there we go.
but his friend is Prince Durin. Yeah.
Yes, and we're given the impression at that point, from based off that scene at least, from Elrond, and Celebor's conversation, that Elrond seems very excited or like positive about the concept or idea, and like very optimistic about enlisting the aid of the dwarves, as if it's like almost a given. You know what I mean? And says basically that like those are his friends, like and whatnot, and at that point, of course, things don't exactly work out exactly that well. But we'll wait on that for a minute. What do you guys think? As we before we get into the next scene, where essentially the naked man, who the actor's name of him is Daniel Wyman, the stranger that they call him, wakes up. Did you guys really take anything out of the Elrond, and Celeborn dialogue and conversation? It was a short scene, but June, was there anything about that stood out to you, or that you felt like we're talking about or mentioning about?
I remember reading somewhere that the hammer that's in that scene belonged to Feanor, who I think is related. Elrond's actually related to. I think that was Elrond's grandfather. So apparently there's some deeper kind of lore thing behind it. But overall, I just thought it was a cool scene. I think Celebrimbor is a really cool character. I'm used to a very different Celebrimbor for one of the games that came out that's set in this universe. So at first I had my reservations about this depiction of him, even though this is probably a little bit more accurate. But I think the actor is really good. The characters play well off of each other. It's really cool. You can see Elrond's kind of almost worship of this great smith. So I think that was a really cool scene.
Yes, Robert Aramayo. Yeah. He seems like a really good actor to me. Of course, good luck pronouncing Morfydd Clark. Galadriel, the actress who plays Galadriel, that's a tough name, man. I don't know about that one, Morfydd. That is not an American name right there. That is definitely a European sounding name, which does not surprise me. I'm sure most of the cast is probably from Europe. I assume it probably is, right? So what'd you think, Cyber? Did anything really did that scene do anything for you or stand out to you at all? Or did you notice anything about it?
I mean, honestly, it was pretty basic to me. I mean, it was kind of just like a brief introduction to the character, and basically just to kind of get your mind going, like, who is this guy? What is this guy about? Like, what is he all about? Like, why did he all of a sudden fall from the sky down into this particular place and stuff like that? So I thought that it was definitely interesting and different. And I thought that it was interesting that they had it where, kind of like he kind of comes to, and he kind of like all of a sudden all the fire that's around him kind of starts to dim, and then all of a sudden he falls back down. And it's like boom, it's all again there again. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I thought that the gal that played the halfling there, or the hobbit, I thought she was. She did an okay job, and I thought that she did a good job expressing, like, what am I dealing with here and stuff like that. So I thought it was definitely an interesting way to start the episode off.
What about the Elrond and Celeborn conversation, where Celeborn initially brings up and starts talking about wanting to create more impactful, greater, powerful things, you know what I mean, and whatnot, and they end up having a dialogue about possibly enlisting the dwarves, and Elrond suggests bringing the dwarves in.
So that scene particularly, I thought it was kind of interesting, but at the same time, I was kind of like, let's move on. At the same time, I definitely thought it could have been a little more exciting. I didn't find it very exciting, but overall, I thought it was interesting what they were talking about and wanting to, get the dwarves involved. And I think that was a good leading point to leading up to him, Elrond going to see his old friend. It happens to be a dwarf. So I think there was good portion to it, and there was a little lagging portion to it. But overall, I thought it was pretty decent.
Okay. And at that point, basically, if I remember correctly, we move on to when we actually do get the stranger, as he's referred to, the naked man guy. He wakes up. The young halflings have sort of hidden him in their like hobbit hole. And at that point, he wakes up, and again, it's kind of like one of those type of scenes where I guess, Nori is trying to communicate with him, and they're trying to kind of get it. He doesn't remember his name. Again, he doesn't speak the same language as them. I couldn't really tell, and I don't remember whether he even spoke any real tangible language at all. So at that point, I mean, they almost, they get him to eat or whatever, and whatnot and everything. And he, did he use his powers again at all or whatever at that point in that initial scene? June, did he do anything like that or whatever, or was it
in the initial scene? No, I think towards the end.
Okay, no, yeah, I just mean when he wakes up.
Oh no, other than that fire, no.
Okay,
yeah.
So yeah, and like honestly, I don't know about you guys, but I think we can kind of, we'll move on to the next scene and incorporate that on our next set of questions, just because not that much really happened or whatever that really I felt was all that interesting or all that like compelling. Other than the fact that one of the other hobbits did actually discover that Nori and Poppy had the naked guy. So we end up then with Arondir and Bronwyn exploring the smoldering ruins of Hordorn. And of course, now Arendor is sort of like the Legolas of the series, I guess, almost in a way.
Yeah.
And Bronwyn is a human, is a woman, a man of the men race or whatever, whatnot, and everything. So, and they have a romantic connection, obviously. And of course, that is actually like considered almost, I believe, looked down upon to some degree by, I believe, the elves to some extent, if not looked down upon, seen as something that doesn't work out so well. If I remember, correctly from like, the previous ones that have happened. I believe that when Aragorn marries, geez, I forgot her name now. Yes. That's only the actual, like the actual in history, the third pairing of man with elf, ever had ever happened or occurred or whatever, but basically, they explore the smoldering ruins of Hordorn, and upon their exploration, they find that there's no bodies. There's no bodies at all. There's all these like destroyed, burnt down buildings and structures and whatnot, but there's no bodies. And of course, more stuff happens on later with all that. But at that point, I guess probably it wouldn't hurt to get right into, Galadriel adrift in the sea, essentially being picked up by a ship of men, we got men and women of the race of men, and they are attacked by like a sea creature that they, for some reason, blame her for, and say, oh, you brought this upon us or whatever, and they kick her off the ship. So she's back in the ocean again. What is it called? The Thundering Sea, I think, or something like that passage
Sundering, I think. Yeah.
Yes. And basically, this sea monster or whatever, and I cannot remember the name for the life of me. I'll look in a second of the character, the guy that comes back and leaves his crew and whatnot, and actually gets Galadriel back out of the water and whatnot and everything. After they are attacked by the sea monster. But again, going to you, Cyber. Did I leave anything important out in my description of those? Did I leave any really important details out in that span? Because that is sort of like a 3-scene span there that were kind of short. And at that point, if there's anything I missed out or didn't mention, please feel free to go ahead. And besides that, just give me your take on what all went down throughout that phase of the episode as we traversed from scene to scene.
Let's see. I don't feel like you missed anything. I think that was pretty solid on, you got pretty much everything that happened in those 3 sequences. But I mean, overall, I definitely think those 3 transitions throughout the episode were really well done. I thought the scenery and the practical effects and the CGI work were all done very well. I thought that it progressed the story very well, and I definitely feel that I think one of the laggiest parts of the episode definitely was when Gadriel was on that basically that raft with that other human, and basically that really dragged out, and just there was I feel they could have cut that down and not made it so long. And I think that the rest of it though really flowed very well and very interactive, and I thought that it gave a lot of great information to progress the story and give us this halfway decent episode so far to really get us enticed and wanting to watch more and really get into it.
That is Hellbrand is his name. That is the guy's name that actually saved Galadriel. If I'm pronouncing it correctly, Hellbrand. The actor's name is Charlie Vickers, who rescued Galadriel from the depths after they were encountered by the giant sea worm. One thing I did not mention was the fact that she hid her ears to them. So clearly, there is sort of this animosity between the different races that's very evident, that we also noticed in the Lord of the Rings films to some extent, that resentment and almost pessimism or mistrust, right? That's there in between the different races where there really is no synergy or sense of camaraderie or anything like that, even whatnot. It's basically only during wartime, when it really counts, that it seems that these races are willing to actually team up, to fight, the forces of the Dark Lord. There's a lot of almost racial hatred to some extent in a way, cultural hatred going on at this point, especially with the elves. They seem to basically kind of detest everybody to some extent. They're very arrogant at times. And then, of course, the dwarves we know are known for detesting elves and everything and whatnot, But either way, they all think they're superior to each other, to some extent. I guess maybe lesser with the men, at least they're not as vocal about it. But so basically, June, what did you think out of those scenes that I dropped? Would you agree with Cyber that the Galadriel scene was sort of maybe, I don't know, uneventful or unimpactful, or didn't really do anything to carry on the episode or anything like that? And what did you think of those scenes in general?
I think overall the scenes looked great. The creature design was really cool. Like Cyber said, the CGI was pretty great. I just feel like a lot of it could have been trimmed down, and that time could have been used to show other things instead. Overall, I think it's fine. It's moving the story forward in a direction it needs to move forward to, but it definitely did. There were parts where it dragged a little bit for the sake of, I want to say, our artistic flourish. But yeah, overall, I think they were fine.
Well, yeah, and I would say so too. I say that probably, if anything, I would agree with Cyber that, to some extent, in terms of his take on that scene of Galadriel emerging from her, 1,000,000-mile swim that she's gone on since she abandoned ship or whatever. She somehow is perfectly. She's not even tired. You know what I mean? Like she's been swimming for months or whatever. You know what? No, I'm just kidding. But no, she's literally swimming from like a continent to a continent, like in an ocean by herself and shit. And it seems to not even be concerned about it or whatever. I'd be scared shitless, frankly, if I was in that situation, myself. I just thinking of the ideas, just thinking of the things below me in the sea that could like kill me or eat me at any given time. But I thought that, if anything, maybe from a visual standpoint, that shift over to the Galadriel scene was just sort of like grayish. Like it didn't pop. It was almost kind of like visually boring in a way. You know what I'm saying? Like, again, they're at sea, and it didn't have that same visual value that some of the other scenes did. And the sea monster didn't really do anything either. It didn't add any real impact to me, to the episode. I wasn't like blown away by it. I mean, it looked okay. But it wasn't, anything, whatever. It wasn't the best thing ever. So I guess for me, I would just say that, I like the scenes with the naked guy, the stranger. I guess I just would have liked it maybe if they would have like given us more to work with in terms of what the hell's going on with them. I felt very confused as to like exactly what his whole deal was at times. Or what his like role was, or like what he's supposed to be about or something, or mission is. I don't know. Either way. So, essentially, when I was watching the episode, I thought to myself that maybe that sea monster could have possibly been connected to the Dark Lord or the Dark Forces or whatever, possibly. But I don't know that for a fact. This was maybe like an idea or an opinion I had that was a possibility. Because I guess you kind of never know it with in this universe with some of the creatures who they're aligned with what. But basically, from there, I guess eventually then, like I said, Galadriel's saved, and basically going back to Arondir and Bronwyn, and then discovering, not finding a single dead body among the burning ruins, they discover a tunnel beneath one of the homes of the now burnt down Horwood. And they obviously have no clue who did this or who's responsible. I guess maybe there's a suspicion that it might be the Dark Forces or the Dark, orcs or something. But essentially, at that point, Arendor, being brave as usual, decides to dig in and explore the tunnel, while Bronwyn returns to Turharand to warn her people, of the impending possible doom or decimation coming their way. Considering that this is just another like a connected, sort of like neighbor, homestead that was just burnt down. Unfortunately, of course, her people do not take her warnings very seriously. To some extent, having to do with, to some degree, with the fact again that she's romantically involved with a elf, which I guess sort of like takes away from her validity to some degree. And now I would like to individually single out that scene just because I would like to ask you, June, at that point, although I don't feel like it's a very really impactful or very important, deeply important scene, I feel like I'd like to sort of just touch on the relationship between Borwin and and Arendor, in that scene and in general. What are your thoughts on that whole concept of the fact that they are a sort of I guess taboo in a taboo type situation? I don't know for sure. You guys could tell me if you guys know, the facts on this. Is it a possibility that maybe the reason that Arendor is not actually with her, or they're not tangibly together, the fact that they are not, that they're of different races? I'm not sure. But go ahead, June. What do you think? What's your take on that whole dynamic?
I think the overall relationship is portrayed really well. I think there's a lot of layers to this that can be explored in the future. And I think both characters individually are really well written enough to where their relationship dynamic adds to their characters rather than detracts from it. Those characters themselves are not just the relationship characters. They have their own storylines, they have their own personalities, they have their own identities, and then that's just enhanced by that relationship dynamic. So overall, I'm a fan. I think it's a fine way of displaying it. Yeah.
Okay. And what did you take out of Arendor finding those tunnels underneath the house there, in Hornwood and whatnot? Did you immediately think to yourself, orcs at that point?
No, I didn't, but I thought those scenes were really well directed. There's a really strong sense of claustrophobia when he's going through those tunnels, and I just thought that it was just really well directed and really well displayed. Yeah.
Cyber, what are your thoughts, man? What do you think about that whole dynamic, that whole relationship with Borwin and Arendor, and everything, and that their romantic connection or friendship or whatever you want to call it, their relationship, and the fact that it is sort of taboo, I guess, to some extent. And they do have that. They do have in episode 1 that initial brief conversation where Barandor basically says to her, I have declared to you my feelings for you 1,000 times or whatnot already, whatever. What do you think of that whole dynamic? What do you think of its fit, I guess, so far in the series?
I mean, honestly, I really haven't paid much attention to that. That side story, to the actual story, it's like extended story all the way through the series itself. I feel it doesn't really play any merit to the storytelling. I don't think you really need that. But of course, people want drama. They want that included into it. So I can see why they put that into it. And I think their relationship, that whole status and everything like that, is just kind of their way of giving us some romance to the series to kind of have a little romance going on. But I don't think that it really plays too much into the actual full-on story itself. And so far how it's been put, I think it's very small. I don't think it's really much to it. And I think that as the time goes by, as the series goes along, I think we're going to see more and more how that is kind of going to be put on the back burner, and that'll be something they reminisce about later on down the series and come back to it, basically. So I don't think there's much to that at all, and I think that their relationship is exactly what it needs to be for the story to continue, to make Gadriel become this powerful being that we are familiar with from the actual Lord of the Rings films.
Do you think it's a possibility, maybe to some extent, that this is just literally just an off the cuff kind of opinion kind of thing? I have no idea if there's any tangibility to this, but do you think there's a possibility that maybe, especially because of the fact that there are restrictions Amazon had to deal with in terms of what they were allowed to put into this series that reflects and is actually from the source material, and that does come directly from the Tolkien, books and whatnot and everything, that they are sort of limited and handicapped in that way? Do you think it's possible to some extent that maybe in a way they wanted and maybe wanted to go with the Borwin Arendor dynamic as almost like a reflection or connection to the Aragorn, and again, what I forget, what is the prince's name?
Elowen, I think.
Yeah, Arwen.
Erwin, yes.
Do you guys think there might be a connection there that they maybe want to use that as a tie-in? In a way, almost to like the popularity of those three films. What do you think, Cyber?
I mean, with any big company, Amazon included, I think they probably are trying to weigh in on that popularity. Most definitely. I think they're definitely trying to make a connection. And with the source material, I mean, that's very possible in any instance, anything that they make. From any series, any movie, they always have that actual source material, such as the books. They take their liberties with it and they use what they want to that they know that's going to sell. And so I think definitely that, anything in the past Lord of the Rings, type of films, the three Lord of the Rings, and then of course the Hobbit films, I definitely think they took what they saw, what was very popular with those, and of course they're going to incorporate it into this Amazon series so that they can keep writing that, that charging whale that's, bringing in that cash flow. So I think that most definitely that is very possible that this, the limited amount of material they have for the series, of course, they're going to embellish on it. So taking that connection, to the other films is most definitely very wise in their choice to connect it and to allow them to keep it popular so that people want to watch it and continue watching it.
What do you think? What are your thoughts on that whole premise, June?
On the romance of Arondir the connection between them and Aragorn?
No, yes, the possibility that maybe that is sort of like a side desire, possibly, from a movie producing standpoint, from a connective standpoint, or a popularity standpoint, to try to kind of like eat off of the lore and the epicness and greatness and the love for the original films, and the fact that there is sort of a handicapping there in terms of what Amazon can do regarding the source material.
Possibly. I think there's merit to the theory. As of now, we haven't seen the relationship have that big of an effect yet. And as Cyber said, moving forward, it might just be something that gets kind of put to the back burner. I'm not really sure about that. I was not thinking about it from that angle.
Of course. No, I understand that. I totally appreciate you not doing that. I'm just trying to think outside the bounds, and just, try to, when I see little spots like that and whatnot, I do think, I wonder. And even if that's what their angle was, I don't think I wouldn't have a problem with it. If that was their desire or their goal, I don't really care. I like it so far. I like both the actor and the actresses that are playing the two characters. I do. So either way, now upon Bronwyn not being very effective or able to essentially warn her people about the potential danger ahead of them from whatever dark forces, basically burned down or eviscerated Horwood. Essentially, now I believe at that point that I don't want to get too far ahead and get into the orc or the dark creature that ends up popping out of the ground, on Bronwyn and Theo later on. I believe at that point beforehand, we do then get Elrond. And thank you, Nikki, if you're still there, for helping me out with Cerimbor's name or whatever. They do go to Khazad-dûm, and they are not exactly welcomed very positively or very warmly upon announcing that they're there. They want to talk to the king and everything and whatnot, and I'm not sure if it was an incarnation of some kind that Elrond used or something or whatever and whatnot that he actually managed to get them in. I wasn't really sure. That I got kind of fuzzy with that, but they get in. After some time they do get in, and there's sort of like a, I don't know, like a rivalry or a tension, between Durin and Elrond, and they have this sort of like, I guess, competition or like trial or whatever, you know what I mean, or whatever, like having to do with having to swing a hammer and break rocks or whatever and whatnot and everything, that whole deal.
That was awesome.
Yeah, I believe Durin won. I wasn't really sure, but either way, like you can sense from that kind of in a way that maybe Durin does not feel the same way about the wonderful friendship that Elrond says that, like, he has with him or whatever, and he's so excited about like seeing his buddy. Cyber, what did you think of our first introduction to the dwarves in the series?
I absolutely love this whole sequence. I was like giddy as shit when they popped up the dwarves finally, because one of my favorite characters in the original Lord of the Rings was Gimli. And I absolutely loved the dwarf characters. And just like in the Hobbit films, I really enjoyed the dwarfs in that too. And so I just thought those characters were so fascinating and so fun. So when the dwarves popped up in this, and Elrond, one of his friends, happens to be a dwarf, I was like, this is awesome. This is so much fun. And then that whole sequence where they're trying to break the rocks a certain way in this competition was absolutely hilarious and so much fun. And then like after they get to, after they finish that up and they end up going back to, his house, and his wife's there, and she like is like, oh my God, I love Elrond. He's got to stay for dinner, and all this was absolutely hilarious too. So that whole sequence, I think, is one of my favorite parts of this episode, and definitely was just really well done and just really fun and enjoyable. And it caught my attention right away as soon as it started happening, and gave us this really kind of rich, kind of inkling of how their relationship was, and kind of give you more insight into how Elrond is too as well. So I thought that did a lot of great for the storytelling in this episode.
Most definitely. June, what's your take?
Oh, I 100% agree. I think dwarves are just awesome as fantasy creatures, and they're always kind of like displayed like this. If you ever like play a dwarf in any kind of like video game, but it's really cool to kind of see that translated onto the screen, and to just see like their culture and the architecture of just seeing a proper dwarven city at its peak was just gorgeous to see. There's a part where Disa, I think the wife of Durin, talks about how they sing to the stone, which is just a really cool way of world building, really cool way of developing a culture of the dwarves, and I absolutely loved it. I think those might have been my favorite scenes from the episode.
Yes, Princess Disa. At least I think that, I'm not sure if that's how you do pronounce it, but Princess Disa is how I would read it. And the actress's name is Sophia Novette, and she was excellent. And obviously, it does not hurt at all to extend that, the whole dwarf part of the episode and go into. But I do want to just point out, of course, that before we do actually get that sort of heartwarming, magical, positive kind of like very reminiscent to like the Hobbit kind of vibe, where you get that again, that energy that the dwarves have, that like, that sort of like humor, that sort of like I don't know, magicalness or whatever and whatnot, and like sort of way about things. They go about things where it is humorous, it is kind of funny, just the way they do stuff sometimes, and like how they talk about things and explain things and shit, you know what I mean? And their customs, I find like humorous at times, but but at the same time, I want to point out that before we do get to that more positive type, scene there where Elrond has an opportunity to then actually talk to Durin directly about why they're really there. The goal, of course, which is to propose some sort of, I guess, collaboration or whatever, or to enlist the aid of the dwarves to help them erect this forge. Which of course eventually is going to have to like make its way to King Durin III. Before we get to that, we get it flushed out that Durin is not happy with Elrond and does not feel like they're much of friends anymore because it's been 20 plus years since Durin's seen Elrond. And at that point, Elrond has missed his children's births. He missed his wedding. He's missed everything that's occurred in 20 years. And of course, that highlights the dynamic of the fact that the elves live forever, why dwarves live a natural life that begins and ends. And so to Elrond, those 20 years were nothing. They were just like a moment, as opposed to the fact that with Durin, it was so impactful that those 20 years went by and he did not see him. It's sort of, I guess, almost in a way, poisoned the relationship or the dynamic of their friendship and whatnot. He was hurt in a way about the whole thing, which I think he did the actor expressed very, very well. That there was a pain there, like, he a real hurt, emotional hurt that, in being treated that way by his friend. And which did surprise me to some extent. And that does sort of set up then and open things up for Princess Disa to jump in and kind of save the day, when Elrond sort of like, eloquently, because he is a diplomat, he is a politician, he eloquently, asked to apologize to Durin's children and his wife for missing the wedding and whatnot, the whole time sort of just trying to buy time in a way, and try to calm things down so that he can actually achieve his goal of being there, and you see some more of of Elrond, who Elrond is. Like he has those diplomatic skills, he wrote the speech for the king in the first episode, and so at that point, Cyber, I definitely agree with you. I think that it was nice that if anything, that probably for me was the biggest piece of connective tissue that I felt so far to the movies was seeing the dwarves and going to Khazad-dûm and everything and whatnot and everything, and that element, that environment and energy. It did remind me very much of Gimli, and I just love the way that they portray the dwarves in this universe. I do. I love their whole way of going about things. But in the meantime, I believe before we actually get to the scene where essentially we end up seeing, for instance, besides Princess Disa, Elrond noticing that Durin has actually planted a sapling of the elvish great tree of Lindon, Elrond's home, which again just gives you an idea, sort of in a way, of like how much the friendship of Elrond to Durin has meant to him in the past. And at that point, based off that scene, Elrond is able to speak to Durin one-on-one and request upon him to talk to his father and propose to him this project that they'd like their aid on. And Durin, of course, accepts and is willing to do that. Now, then, before then, we do get the scene where we get the dark creature. I didn't know it was an orc at first. It took me a minute to figure it out. I couldn't tell. We get this freaking dark creature that pops out of the ground at Borwin and Theo's house. And now, don't forget that in the first episode, again, as far as that connection between the dark forces and the Dark Lord and the hobbits, don't forget that we had that scene where we saw Theo and that kid actually, having a shard of Sauron's black sword. For some reason, they actually had that, within their, were holding it. Now at that point, the orc or the dark creature forces this way, from underneath the ground, and we get like a short battle scene where Theo and Bronwyn fight the orc and like are using like spoons and kitchen utensils and shit to fight it and everything and whatnot. Bronwyn, I believe, is the one that actually kills it, and she then decides to go ahead and take its head to the local tavern and finally give some proof to her warning to her people. At which point, that they do see at that point the impending danger. They believe her. And we end up at that point with her people gathering their possessions and whatnot and everything and deciding to leave their homestead and whatnot and take off before the danger comes. At which point Theo is in possession of Saran's sword. It is rebuilding on its own and actually saps blood from a wound on his hand and grows and rebuilds off of it. Now, where that's going to go, I have no idea, but that's definitely cool. That's very interesting. And it kind of builds up some cool suspense in terms of how that dynamic is going to flush out. What do you guys think, June? Again, I'm not that well informed. I don't know for concrete, if what exactly happened back in the day between the hobbits and Morgoth's forces or whatever, and what their role was in the war. But what do you think of this dynamic in the series where there is some sort of connection in a way between the actual halflings and the dark forces in Saran?
The halflings or the humans, you mean?
The halflings. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I apologize. The humans. You're right. It is the humans, not the halflings.
Okay, yeah. So, no, I think it's really cool. I think it's they mentioned how these were the men that sided with Sauron in the past, and I think it's there's actually a shot that you see in the village where it shows it's a wood carving of an eagle carrying, like a really scary looking eagle creature carrying a man off, and that's a reference to the eagles, that obviously were in that same war, but we have always seen them from this perspective of the good guys, quote unquote. So we've always seen them as these beautiful kind of angelic beings. But then these guys who are clearly fighting against these eagles in that war probably have tales where they remember them as being these terrible creatures that were carrying them off and killing them. So I think it's just really cool to see how much history is still affecting the setting. And I thought the scene with the orc was awesome too, because we've always seen orcs as cannon fodder in the past, where all these great warriors were just able to slice through them. But then when you really think about it, for the average human being to just come up against one orc is a terrifying thing. These are really strong, powerful creatures that are terrifying. And I think that was also a really cool way to depict that in the show versus how they are depicted in the movies.
What is going on, Raymond, Mr. Booze and Chill? I hope you are enjoying an alcoholic beverage, my friend, as you are taking in our review of episode 2 of The Rings of Power. I do not know, sir. I did not see the Terminator in this episode. Maybe he'll make an appearance in episode 3. I'm not sure. But we'll see. But either way, it's good to see you, as always. And shout out to Booze and Chill YouTube channel and podcast and my buddy Raymond. He's a good guy. Either way, Cyber, what do you think? What do you think of this relationship, or where this could flush out potentially? This dynamic of there being a faction of the men that are dedicated to the dark forces and whatnot and everything, and apparently still are, to some extent, and still view Morgoth or Sauron as, I guess, like their king or their leader.
I mean, there are always going to be some people loyal to some dark force, no matter, who they are. I mean, I think that these folks, they are trying to seem like they're good, but in reality, the whole time they are really loyal to the dark forces and Sauron, and that they're just waiting for him to make his reappearance so that they can be their full potential selves. And I think that their thoughts are, let's go with the flow until he returns so that we can, then follow our master. And that's just like with any bad guys, kind of crew in any film. You could basically any films, that has been out in the last, 50, 60 years. There's always that gang that's loyal to that one particular bad guy that, even though they're out of the picture for a while, they end up eventually come back. They're still there waiting to go. So I think those guys have a lot of potential to go back to Sauron once eventually he returns and tries to take over the world, basically.
Sure, and that sort of, in a way, also lends some more tangibility to Galadriel's, case or premise that she's sort of like the beacon of the warning or whatever, trying to let people know, like, hey, the war's not over. You know what I mean? We're not safe. You know what I mean? Don't feel like we can just be lulled into sleep or whatever and whatnot, and this is not going to happen again or something, right? And I feel like to some extent that is another deep connection to the Lord of the Rings. That is very much like a reciprocal sort of dynamic in terms of, there being a desire upon, among general society to just forget about Sauron or forget about the Dark Lord and forget about the dark forces, when they lose a war or whatever or are vanquished. And then you have your actors that don't forget, right? Like Gandalf, Saruman to some extent. So I did not mention earlier that when essentially Halbrand rescued Galadriel from the sea, and realizes, that she's a runaway from the elves, he reveals to her that he himself is a runaway, having escaped the Southlands because of orcs that had overrun, I guess, his hometown or his city, and burnt it down. And essentially, they do later on in the episode then encounter a storm, and Galadriel ends up back in the ocean again. Falls off of their little driftwood skiff that they're on or whatever, and Halbrand rescues her again, and they seem to be almost like bound together, I guess. They're sort of they've teamed up, and we end up seeing someone who I have no idea who the hell it was, some mysterious person on a grand ship, discovering them. They're basically found by this mysterious person on a grand ship and sort of almost saves them to some extent, in a way, I guess, probably, right? Is how things flush out. I have no idea who that was. I thought it was maybe another elf, possibly. I really couldn't tell. But I know, let's go to you, Cyber. Again, this scene didn't do anything for me either with Galadriel. I got nothing really out of it personally. I didn't really think much of it. I'm already getting the vibe, getting the connection that maybe this is going to end up being our next romantic relationship in the series or whatever. This dude and Galadriel, right? It only makes sense, right? That she also would go with like somebody outside her race, as like a an interest or whatever. But I don't know. What do you think? Who do you think that guy was? The grand ship that popped up, possibly, if you have any ideas. And did you find anything, at all about that dynamic interesting?
I have no idea who the guy is. I feel that how they presented him, how they brought him in, really didn't give you much about who he was. So I still feel that the character is a mystery at this point, and we'll eventually find out who he is. But at this point, I don't think he really is anybody of any real significance. And just like you, this was another one of those parts that I just felt was very laggy, and that there was plenty that they could have cut out to allow a lot more for in, you know, throughout the rest of the episode. It just wasn't, there was nothing there that I thought was really great. And I thought it was a lag point in the episode.
Yeah, they almost could have cut Galadriel out of the episode flat out and just given her a break, right? And then brought her back for episode 3, and I would have been fine with that. I would not have minded that at all. You don't just because she's the main character doesn't mean you have to have her. You got to throw her in every episode just to have her there, right? I mean, what do you think, June?
Yeah, that was the episode, the scene that I thought was kind of dragged a little bit. It was beautifully shot, sure, but I don't think it added to the narrative overall. As far as the person who rescues them, the identity of that person, I don't know if what the rules are for spoilers, but we do eventually find out who that guy is, and it's a pretty cool reveal if you kind of know some of the names moving forward, but it's gonna be a fun time.
You can tell us. It's okay. We're an episode behind. That's just the reality. Like, episode 3 is already out. Yeah, okay. We're gonna review episode 3 next Wednesday night, folks. But we are an episode behind.
So yeah, so if that's the case, then yeah, that character his name is Elendil, and yeah, you actually see him in the original trilogy in the very first scene where they're seeing the last alliance of men fighting Sauron. And he's the father of Isildur, who's the guy who cuts off the fingers from Sauron in those movies and eventually gets the ring. So he's actually an ancestor of Aragorn.
He's a man then. He's not an elf.
Not an elf, no.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I do remember who you're talking about. I do. And again, I felt like just like, bouncing right off of Cyber, bouncing right off of June, I felt like if anything, if I was going to have one complaint about this episode at all, it would simply be just that maybe they could have done something differently with Galadriel in the episode, did something different with those scenes. I don't know. Taking them out. I don't know, but either way, if there was a weak spot overall in terms of how it will affect my grade of the episode at the end of the show, that will definitely be something that's going to shave some points off of like my rating. I can tell you right now. It does detract from some of the greater scenes in the episode. It does in a way, and it slows things down, and this is more of a suppositional type episode to begin with, I thought anyways, so at that point, you don't want things to be slowing down, I wouldn't think. But either way, basically based off of that and moving forward from that, we end up with, obviously after, Borwin and Theo have killed the orc and everything and whatnot, and the people have decided to leave the homestead and all that and everything, because they're afraid of having their town burned down. We end up essentially with basically the Prince Durin, the fourth, bringing Elrond's proposal and Celebrion's proposal to King Durin the fourth or the third, excuse me. And at that point, King Durin is sort of, I guess, pessimistic, not so positive about the whole thing. And essentially tells Durin that he sort of has like a soft spot for the elves, like he's sort of naive or whatever in a way, or wowed by the elves or something or whatever, or fascinated by them or whatever. And they end up surveying a box, which we do not get to see what the contents are. I believe I didn't see anything in it. So I don't know if that was some sort of we're gonna get that in episode 3 kind of deal or what. But essentially, that sort of kind of wraps up the episode. And going to you, June, what did you think of our first look at our first introduction of the actual king of the dwarves. And what did you think of the box and his attitude towards Elrond's proposal?
I think it's a really cool parallel to see how even during this time, the dwarves kind of have this very kind of hoarding nature. In the Hobbit movies, we see how once they find something shiny, they really like to covet it. So I think it's cool to have that consistency. I think that might be some kind of crafting material in that box. Possibly what eventually goes on to become mithril, which is a material that that the elves actually end up using like their armor. I don't know, but I think it was a cool scene. I think I just really love the portrayal of the different races and seeing how those races do eventually become what we're more familiar with in Lord of the Rings.
Do they also use mithril for swords?
Possibly, I know they use it for Celebrimbor does stuff with it. With another dwarven smith who he has a cool relationship with, but I don't know if we'll see that in the series. But
I just remember that the dwarves do have their own type of like element that the elves that they use. What they forge their own type of swords that are very unique.
Yeah, like they glow when orcs are nearby. Maybe,
yes.
Possibly, I could be, but I'm not sure.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's almost magic.
Yeah,
That's like an enchantment almost and whatnot that's put on the sword that causes that to some extent. Because again, the elves are known for their magical abilities. But Cyber, what did you think of that? Basically, that wrap up or final scene. What did you think? It wasn't the final scene, but what did you think of our introduction to the actual king of the Mines of Moria and of Khazad-dûm?
I liked it. I enjoyed it. I liked the introduction to him. I thought they did a good job. I thought he looked very cool and unique, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else he provides throughout the rest of the series. And I thought that they did a good job of kind of giving us like this little teaser right at the end of the episode of what's to come with this character and with the dwarves too themselves, because like we've mentioned prior, that these dwarves are so cool and so awesome. It's like we need dwarves throughout this whole entire series. So, it looks like it's going to be really fantastic. And I really enjoyed the scene. I thought it was really well done.
Do you guys feel like it's necessary, like totally necessary? You have to make as much of an effort as possible to consume as much of the original source material as possible to understand this story to any level you can get to be able to enjoy this show? Or do you feel like it's okay to go in sort of blind and watch these episodes and just take them in as they go and enjoy them for what they are and figure sort of kind of discover and learn the story on your own? You know what I mean? And figure it out on your own, maybe even pick up a few things here and there just to kind of help yourself. But what do you think about that, June?
I think it's a really great spot for anyone to get into Lord of the Rings in general. I know there have been a lot of detractors about this show, but I think it stands toe to toe as far as I'm concerned with all of the stuff we've gotten before. So we're really fortunate to kind of live in a time where we have the show, the Hobbit trilogy, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. 3 great points where anyone can kind of jump into these things, watch it, and then have all this other content to then get into. So I think the show is doing a great job. I think it's really cool, and I don't think it's really necessary for anyone to have that much background knowledge. It helps. There's a lot of great nods and references that you pick up on, but I don't think it should be a hard requirement.
I think in a way you almost have to watch the Lord of the Rings films, though. You almost got to. So you're almost obligated if you really want to take it. If you want to understand the series to any level and really appreciate it in a way. What do you think, Cyber? Don't you kind of have to watch the 3 films?
I mean, honestly, yeah, most definitely. You'd want to watch the previous films, especially because this is supposed to take place so many years prior to those events.
Yep.
Yeah. And at the same time, too, there are going to make references throughout this series, that for a fact, that are going to reference things that are to come. So the fact that, we're dealing with, Sauron, basically in his kind of his beginning of, prior to him, killing all the different people and almost, taking over the world and stuff like that. That all is going to be referenced towards, the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit books. And so, that would be very wise to watch those just to give yourself an educated history on more about that universe so that, when things do pop up, such as maybe they might end up going to the Shire at some point in this series. Maybe they might end up going, somewhere that we saw in one of the previous films or in one of the previous books, that could correlate to that. So I definitely would recommend watching those films just to have a better essence of just Middle Earth altogether.
Yeah, and I mean, I personally feel like, for me, it would be harder to enjoy these episodes without that, at least that background material to work with. You know what I mean? Like, to at least have some grasp of the premise of what this universe is about. Middle Earth, the different races, the different continents or the different, geography of this world. I guess at that point, all I'll probably ask is a wrap-up question for you guys, since I'm right at the hour and a half mark, and I'm trying to I'm trying to pull a cyber and be as concise with this review as possible. I'm being very cognizant of the clock right now. No, I'm just playing. I'm joking. What do you guys think? I mean, I'll start things off. I'll give this episode from a 1 to 10, giving it a rating from a star standpoint. Obviously, worst to best. I'd say I give this one. I'd give it a 6.5, 6.75, maybe a 7 as a stretch. And that'd be the best I could give it. That's the fairest I can be. What do you think, June?
A strong 7.
Okay. Hey, you know what? I like that. I like that you got a solid number to give. You're not like you're not pussyfooting around like I am and jumping around and adding 0.25s and shit over there, left and right and everything and whatnot, just to because you don't want to piss anybody off or whatever. What do you think, Cyber?
I give this episode a solid 6.
Okay. I was almost expecting you to drop like a 4 or a 4.5 or some shit on that one, to tell you the truth. That's what I was figuring.
No, honestly, I would have given it a lower score, but thankfully, because of the dwarf sequence, and then the orc sequence, that's why I got a 6, is because of those two really strong sequences that were just so much fun. So that's one of the reasons why I give it a 6, about halfway, a little over the halfway point between, 1 and 10, because those two scenes deserve a 6 alone by themselves. So if the rest of the episode had been like episode 1, it would have been a solid 10. But because of that lag and that drag in a few of the sequences, that's why I give it a 6.
Well, I just want to point out, too, that honestly, think what you want of the dwarf women or whatever compared to the elvish women. When it boils down to it, when you get a blowjob from a dwarf chick, we're talking about some Oscar-nominated type head, all right? Compared to the elvish women giving head, that shit is like, that is like some weak-ass, D- type game over there with that head. So just to be clear, don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by the semi-unattractiveness of the dwarf women. They've got their skills. They've got their talents. So, I'm telling you, Oscar-nominated head, man, without question.
Well, I think that's a good point for me to bid you guys a good night, gentlemen.
Hey, you know what? There you go. And
always end on a high note, I'd say.
Hey, you know what? There you go. Hey, why not? I think it's a good time for us all to call it a night. Hey, folks, guess what? That's the end of our review. That's episode 2 in a nutshell. I don't think we left anything out. Of course, you're more than welcome to let us know, if we didn't talk about anything enough, or point out some, massive, profound thing that happened in the episode that we missed or I didn't mention or something. And besides that, Raymond, appreciate you, brother. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the 0 you're giving the episode for no Gandalf and no Meteor Terminator. Besides that, shout out to Drug Wizard, our boy, our friend, who should have been Elrond if the casting had been done right. And besides that, folks, again, this is the MCU's Bleeding Edge YouTube channel and podcast. We, of course, are now solidly live streaming our shows on Rumble, the platform Rumble, and we're happy to be there. And Cybernetic Shark, my friend, did you have anything to add to the finale of the episode?
Just, great episode. 6, solid 6, like I said. But just want to shout out to people out there. Yeah, don't forget that we are a part of the Minds of Creativity Network as well. And that's something that Mr. Jeffrey is working on still to get that going and make that awesome network. And just, shout out to all the people that come and watch and all that good stuff. And just also letting people know the end of my first round of the Face of Horror contest is still going on. It ends tomorrow at 8 p.m. Pacific time. I am currently in 3rd. So I wish I will be making it to the second round, but any last votes to get me up to that coveted 1 spot would be great. Like I said, it's free. Just go to my link. We'll have the link down in the comments below for this episode. And go ahead and click on that. Do that free vote. You can also do the voting that costs money. It goes towards cancer research for kids. And, you don't have to do it. You can do that, the free votes, as long as you add up if you put in your Facebook information, it'll give you 2 votes, all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, it's going to be, like I said, just to give everyone a reminder, it's going to be 9 rounds. So this is lasting from September to November. So I'm hoping to at least get to that final round. And with all your guys' help, I appreciate all that have been participating. You guys are all been great. I want to thank you. And, of course, I can't forget my promise to booze and chill. Definitely. And, but yeah, so make sure, hit that button, hit that like, hit that vote, people. And also, if you enjoy me here on the MC's Binge, definitely check out my solo content as well. And I've been putting up a lot of shorts up there for you guys, some impressions and all that kind of stuff. So definitely check that out. And you guys are great.
There you go. Are you going to be making an appearance on Booze and Chill at some point here soon, Cyber?
I have to.
Oh, that's right. You promised.
I got to booze and I got to chill.
Hey, you know what?
Especially with Raymond, man.
Well, Raymond's good people, man. I don't know how. There's nothing else to say about him but that. June, any final thoughts? Any shout outs or anything, brother? For your second, did you enjoy your second appearance on the Bleeding Edge?
Oh yeah, man, it was a good time. It just always kind of like works funny with my work schedule, so I wish I was more energetic towards the end, but I just kind of start teetering out because this is like way past my bedtime. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on, and nice to meet you, Cyber.
Hey, you know what? We're glad to have you on, brother. As usual, you do a great job. You know what I'm saying? I mean, honestly, for your second time ever as a guest, you're already a better guest than people I fucking have met that like have guested 17,000 times. You know what I mean? So at that point, like I've told you before, brother, down the road, I would not be surprised if you end up probably hosting your own show down the road at some point. You're too talented not to. So, you know, you'd be being unfair to yourself if you did not go in that direction, I think, at some time down the road. Plus, with your how excited you get about this stuff and how much energy you have for it and enjoy it, why not, right? But thanks to June, thanks to Raymond, thanks to Joss, thank you to Nikki for keeping me on point and whatnot, and making pointing out my failures and everything, and breaking it down and supporting me and having my back and whatnot, and explaining things to me, you know, since she obviously is a big Lord of the Rings fan. You could tell. You always tell when you got one of those, right? Nothing wrong with that. I'd much rather be a big Lord of the Rings fan than be a freaking huge Harry Potter fan. I can tell you that right now. But either way, folks, for the MCU's Bleeding Edge YouTube channel and podcast, for Cybernetic Shark, my host, and for our good friend June, who gave us a all-star exit. We will see you next time. Have a good evening, and take care.